Hello, thanks for tuning into RadioFreeRhinecliff.org and this show in particular. Correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here today with two sisters, Edna, Clyne, Rekhy, and Morag Benepi of Rhinebeck. Edna's from Inverness. Is that where you currently live?
Yes.
Scotland.
The north of Scotland.
And you came all the way here just to be on my show. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I thought that was the case. You need to stay a little bit closer to the mic. And Morag lives 2 doors away. And we've met before. How long have you been in Rhinebeck, Morag?
It's 5 years. This is my 5th year.
5th year. And you moved here from where?
From New York City.
Oh, nice. And how do you miss New York City?
Not at all.
How did you come to choose Rhinebeck?
Oh, because my son Callum was here and Jessica Bard, who is his wife, and they have a place in Milan. And so I kept coming up because of all the things going on in Rhinebeck.
Right.
Like Sinterklaas and how Rhinebeck is. Yeah,
right.
Always coming up.
So you're coming up to visit family mostly, and then and you worked in the city. You retired at some point and chose to come to Rhinebeck.
Oh yes, I decided it was time to leave the city.
And why did you make that determination?
Because I wanted to be in the country,
Yeah.
and I wanted a garden. I needed a garden, and
I needed a garden. Oh, nice. Well, that's a great reason to be here. And how do you like this place? You have a place right on the corner of South Street.
Yes, I live on the corner of South Street at the should I say that? At the traffic light.
Yeah,
Just there.
Your gardens are beautiful.
Well,
I appreciate those flowers almost year round.
Yeah,
the whole
extension
season.
of fire escape gardens.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, that's good. And Edna, you came here because your sister's here. Is that correct?
Yes,
So also to visit family.
Yes.
And like her, do you have any idea of maybe relocating to Rhinebeck?
No, definitely not.
But both of you were you born in Inverness, Scotland? Both of you?
I was born in Longside in Aberdeenshire.
Okay.
It's a village which is quite near Peterhead.
Okay. None of the names really ring a bell for me.
The Scottish one on the east coast.
Okay. But Inverness is like way up near the top, right?
Well, yes, it is. Well, there's Rossshire and before, and then you go right to the top, and you're just have a little space between that and Shetland. To go up to.
And Shetland is that an island off the coast?
It's an island, yes, at the top. It's very famous, actually.
Sure. And when you all were young, did you visit Shetland?
No. Did we? Our grandmother lived in Shetland for a while, and our grandfather.
in the summers.
On
in the summertime.
On mom or dad's side?
Dad's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my father's side.
But would they come visit you where you all were living instead of you going
they
to...
would do as we got older and more responsible. So they would come and visit us. But then our grandfather was killed up there.
Up in Shetland?
Yes.
And how
he
did that
had a
happen?
fishing fleet, and they used to take the boats up to the islands for the summer to catch all the fish. And the barrels were on the lorry. I'm not sure what happened, but he was behind it, and the barrels fell off. So that was goodbye, grandfather.
He was behind a truck with barrels on it. They
Yes.
fell off and...
Crushed him, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
So then we didn't have him anymore.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, it's a long time ago, but it was sad.
Yeah, and it must have been very sad for your father as well.
Oh yes, and Gran, of course, she was his wife, and she was up there as well.
Did she stay in Shetland after that, or did she come down to live with
you
y'all?
She came back down, yes.
Okay, and was came back down? Was the family history around Inverness, or was it up in Shetland?
Well, where would it start? It was in Inverness-shire.
Right.
And first of all, we stayed in Balloch, which is a village.
Aberdeenshire. We really come from Aberdeenshire.
Well, we're originally from Aberdeenshire, yes, but Aberdeenshire, Peterhead, and Longside village is in the East Coast in Aberdeenshire. And
Right.
then I think I was only about 5 years old when we left there. And my father came up to Inverness and started a business there.
And why did he relocate to Inverness?
It was after the war. So
Okay.
during the war, he built aerodromes near Peterhead. And then after the war, we moved up to Inverness-shire.
And what kind of business did he start?
He was building buildings. So he was building sort of very modern for the...
Yeah, they look like Art Deco houses.
Yeah.
Beautiful Art Deco houses.
Oh, wow. What fun. And how did he get into that? That sounds like a lovely...
He was a very wonderful artist and designer.
Uh-huh.
And he just designed all these Art Deco houses and started to build them.
So he designed them and built them?
Yes. Well, he had staff to help out, but...
Right.
Uh-huh.
That's nice. And do you to this day have an affinity for Art Deco style architecture?
Yes, I love it. In fact, when I stay in Inverness now, I can look out and see one of my father's buildings, down the road. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's so nice. And his name was something Clyne, I'm guessing? Alec Clyne.
Alexander.
Alexander. And could we, if people were interested, like me, could I find some of his work on the internet?
I don't know. Would you find it on the internet? He died when he was 47.
Right.
Tragically, of a heart attack. And that was brought on just by hard work. He was everything had to be exactly precise.
Right.
Right.
So Grandpa died, and then your dad died at 47 when you were 16 or 17?
I was 12. I
12.
think. Yes, I was 12 when he
Okay.
died.
Huh. And then, I'm just going to fast forward here, and then you had a dog named Major.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then the story is Major, as dogs do. Major eventually passed away.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And this is why you're here. Can you tell the story from then?
From then on. Well, he died I really can't remember how he died.
Right.
But I can remember being totally just distressed. I couldn't stop crying. I missed him so much. And it was into the second day and I was still crying. And my mother said to me, look, you have to stop crying. Nenny was my name then. It was, they just called me Nenny instead of Edna. And I had a twin brother and he started that off by saying it. But anyway, what was I talking about?
Oh, you're talking about when Major passed away.
Oh,
and
right.
2 days of
right.
crying.
2 days of crying. And then my mother came through and she said, Nenny, you've got to stop this crying. She said, well, I tell you what to do. She said, get some paper and a pencil and write down what you feel. And that was what I did.
Amazing. And that is this poem called The Rainbow Bridge.
Isn't a poem, it's just what came out of me.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I have it here. Would you read this for us?
Yes, I would.
Thank you so much.
It still makes me cry. I'm sorry. Every time I look
sweet.
at it. This is The Rainbow Bridge by Edna Clyne Rekhy. Just this side of heaven is a place called Rainbow Bridge. And when an animal dies that has been especially close to someone here, your pet goes to Rainbow Bridge. There are meadows and hills for all of our special friends, so they can run and play together. There's plenty of food, water, and sunshine, and friends are warm and comfortable. All the animals who have been ill and old are restored to health and strength, and those who were hurt are made better and strong again, like we remember them before they go to heaven. They are happy and content, except for one small thing. They each miss someone very special to them who had to be left behind. They all run and play together, but the day comes when one suddenly stops and looks into the distance. His bright eyes are shining. His body shakes. Suddenly he begins to run from the herd, rushing over the grass, his legs carrying him faster and faster. And when you and your special friend finally meet, Sorry.
Take your time.
Finally meet. You cuddle in a happy hug, never to be apart again. You and your pet are in tears. Your hands again cuddle his head. And you look again and
Oh my goodness.
you look again into his trusting eyes, so long gone from life, but never absent from your heart. And then you cross the rainbow bridge together.
Okay, now I'm going to cry too. As you're just finishing up, this beautiful dog comes into the
Yes.
into the booth here. We don't have dogs in here, and stood there and looked up at you, and just as you're getting choked up. I mean,
And dogs seem to be attracted by me.
that's really something. So, thank you so much for reading that. It's a beautiful poem. Anybody who wants to read it again can go online and type in The Rainbow Bridge by Edna Clyne Rekhy.
It was there for 60 years, and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
You know,
Now-
so there's a lot of changes. Some of them have changed it.
Right, I'll bet. So now I'm holding in my hand right now the original piece of paper that you wrote this on. And the story goes that, after a couple of days of just inconsolable crying, your mom said, write this down. And so you...
Well, I said, yes, I think I'll do that. And I was still crying. In fact, you can see the corner torn off of that paper.
Yeah.
I tore that off because there were tears on it. But it was just such a special time. I started to put my pen on and then my pencil on, and the words just came to me. And to start with, I could feel Major behind me, and I thought it was him that was talking to me. And then we maybe did about 4 or 5 lines were spoken. And then I heard another voice coming from the right-hand side, and instantly I knew this was God. Now, I didn't have anything really especially learned about God or whatever. You know, we'd come through Sunday school and that sort of thing. But this was so special and so different. And I could feel the 2 voices together, and I was writing it down. It didn't go fast. It went at my pace. But I did make mistakes, and I had to stroke them out.
Yeah, I see that.
Change them, yes.
It is really special to hold the original piece of paper here.
I know
now,
it is.
where did you get this piece of paper from?
Pinched it out of the back of Morig's jotter.
What is a jotter?
A jotter's a school book to write in.
Okay, so you tore it out of your sister's.
Well, my mum actually tore it out of that.
I see.
And she did it very quickly and gave it to me. Did you know?
Morig, you're making a face. Is that the story you recall?
I didn't tell her. I don't know.
No comment.
No comment.
From this sibling. So you wrote it down, and lots of people write things and they don't know when to finish or if they're finished. Did you know you were finished with this when you got to the end?
It stopped because we were going to go on together. We were going to cross the Rainbow Bridge, and then I didn't call it the Rainbow Bridge until I had finished. I just felt that's what it should be.
Right.
And you see, I've put it on the top at the back.
Right.
And that was after I had written the whole thing. So it was a very special time for me.
Right. So you wrote it down. Did you read it to your mom or your siblings? Or
I just handed it to my mum to read, and she read it through, and she said, "That is beautiful." And then she sort of looked at me and she said, "Nenny, you will go far."
And now here you are, all the way to Rhinecliff.
Here I am, yes.
Yeah. And so, what happened after that? You wrote it down. You showed it to your mom. Morig, did Mom show it to you, or did Nana?
We did show it after we'd. Nana, first of all, I showed it to you afterwards. I remember, and you know what big sisters are, so she wasn't very impressed by it. But.
I was always away. I was always away, and I was much younger, and so and then years later, she did this poem, or I saw it. I didn't see it until
you saw it for a long time.
It was announced,
and then you discovered it was your writing on the back, which I've scribbled out. You see.
I love that part of it too. When the story that I read said when you discovered that there was writing on the back, you erased it.
I thought, oh my gosh. Well, I just scribbled over it.
Right.
And that's it there with Morag's
I
writing
can see
behind
that.
it.
I love holding the actual piece of paper.
Well, I had it in a box. I went out with a couple of three of my friends, because they were a bit concerned about me. I was so upset. So we went out and had some I don't know, fish and chips or something somewhere, and then we read it in the restroom we were in, and we were all in tears. They were crying as well. So they asked if they could have a copy of it.
Right.
And so I did. We went home. We didn't have a typewriter or photocopies or anything then. I mean, this is 60 years ago.
Right.
You know? And I wrote out a copy for each of them. So they went, that was it. They went off with their copies. And I put it in this box in the attic.
Wait, what does it say in the cover of that box?
It says, if you can't find it, it's in here.
Right. I love the idea of a box up in the attic.
Yeah.
With the writing on the lid. If you can't find it, it's in here.
I had stuck a big label on it. You know?
So let me just back up. You made copies for friends who liked this.
Three of my friends, and that was all I did.
And that was all you did. And then, way back then, they liked the copies. Did you hear anything more about it?
No.
So that was sort of...
I didn't know anything about it until Paul Cardinaris contacted me from America, and I can't remember exactly what he asked me, but it was, what did I know about the Rainbow Bridge? Now,
how did Paul Cardinaris, who's a journalist...
I still don't know exactly, but what was the first thing? He contacted me. Who did he find? I can't remember. Who did he find? And somebody said, they had about 25 different people who were all claiming to be the writers of the Rainbow Bridge.
Right.
And he somehow
No, you wrote that you had written it, and that's
Sorry?
how you met Paul.
I what?
Yeah.
Right. Tell me again.
Yes, they were trying to find who was the author of the Rainbow Bridge.
Everybody was trying to find it.
But how did Paul track you down?
It was through somebody else who knew that I had written my book, Sanusi and Jack, and he had said to Paul, try this lady, she just may be the one.
Okay.
And that's what happened.
So he just took a flyer and got in touch with you because he was on the trail of trying to track down
He'd actually contacted a friend of mine. I think she was president of the Women's Institute or something. So she called me up and said, would you be interested in this man talking to you about the Rainbow Bridge? And
when that call came in, when was the last time you had even thought about this?
60 years.
So when she said, would you mind talking to somebody about Rainbow Bridge?
I couldn't even remember.
Yeah, that's my question. Did it ring a bell? Or you?
Yeah. Well, wait till I think. She just said to me that Paul Cardinaris would love to speak to me and asked her permission. So somebody had known that I had done talks and demonstrations about the waste in the world and, recycling things. So he called her to start with.
And was she one of the three friends who you had given copies to way back when?
No. And in fact, I think what has happened with that was that she had, or the three of them, had seen somebody else, had let them read it, and then it just went on from there. It's sort of everybody wanted copies of it.
Sure.
And I didn't know anything about it. And it wasn't until Paul Cardinaris found me and said, did I know anything about it? And I had to think, do I know anything about this? And then I said, oh, yes, I have it up in the attic.
in the box. If you can't find it, it's in here.
Yeah.
And so this journalist from the U.S., did he come over to visit you in Inverness?
No, we did it all over the computer and letters and emails. It was amazing. Paul Cowandaris is a very famous writer in this country.
Uh-huh.
And he just became like my agent. And he said to me, this is going to explode. And he said, if you don't let somebody in between, you're going to be bombarded with telephone calls and emails.
Right.
So I said, what can we do about it? Well, he said, if I become your agent, then I can decide who's going to speak to you and who's not. So one of the first people that he decided was quite good was, oh my God, I can't remember her name. But anyway, she was one of the journalists or writers of the Geographical magazine.
Oh, National Geographic.
National Geographical.
Right. Now,
yes.
this was last year, right, when he called you?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a pretty new thing that you've been connected with this as the author of it.
Uh-huh. And I said to him, well, it's not all in my mind, but I know I did it when my dog died, when my beautiful dog died. And then the story went on of how it was written.
And did you remember Major's name?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I've always remembered him.
Well, it's a beautiful bit. I call it a poem because it has that sort of emotional resonance to it that you think of poetry.
Well, as I wrote it, I was crying. But at the end of it, I just had this feeling of complete peace.
Right.
And my tears were stopped. And I felt lovely after that.
And you got a little choked up just now reading it through.
Yes.
Were you
I even have to mention it and I feel it, I'm choking up. I miss them so much.
What were you thinking or feeling just now that touched you in that way?
Every time I look at him or I listen to things or listen to my poem, it brings back the memory of how sad I was at the time.
Right.
Absolutely devastated.
Right.
And I think really it was my first ever losing somebody to death. And it was absolutely horrible. And I kept saying, who's got him now? And that's what happened.
Right.
So after I read the poem, he's told me who he was with. So
I love that. And Morag, did you know Major? Was Major in the house when you were still in the house?
No, I was away at the time. I was already living in the United States. So
Okay.
I heard all about this when I went home to visit.
Right.
And it was all happening. So that was amazing. What I thought was interesting was that she used the images, of the rainbow. And one thing about the house at Bloch that my father had built, there were always rainbows over the house, over the loch, up towards Culloden Moor at the back. We were on Culloden, the road going up to Culloden Moor. And we used to go walking up there a lot, all of us together, and there was a bridge. So I see, the images are all there.
Right.
The rainbows constantly. My mother, we've got lots of photographs of Nana's pictures, Nana's rainbow pictures, right?
Yes. Every time there was a rainbow, Nana
yes,
would
from
be
every direction. Mm-hmm. So, I was trying to think it through and think, how, because the images are so beautiful and it's such and it's comforted so many people. That's the wonderful thing about it.
It's comforted so many people.
And so well known.
I wasn't even aware that anybody had it.
So
I didn't know. And when he said to me, I've been looking for you for 30 years.
This was Paul?
Yes.
Kudinaris?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
He'd been looking all that time, and then at last. So he was very happy that he'd found me.
I'll bet. So it spread. You touched on this, Morag. I mean, it's touched so many people. You gave 3 copies out,
yes.
60 years ago, 50 years ago. And then those people must have given out more copies to their friends.
I don't know. No, what I think is that they have lent it to somebody, and then it's just gone on from there.
Right.
They may have written it, I don't know. But I mean, you don't have the same friends after 60 years that you had when you were quite young, you know.
But eventually, you know, somebody gave it to somebody, and they gave it to two people, they gave it to two people,
That's
or
what
three
happened.
people, or 10 people. And then eventually it got, unbeknownst to you, living, Lord only knows where you were at the time, Inverness,
couldn't believe it. I
or
just could not believe it.
Spain, or somewhere else, and we'll get to that in a bit. Eventually, Dear Abby picked it up. And Dear Abby, at the time, was one of, if not the number one column in U.S. newspapers. Right. Everybody read Dear Abby. It was an advice column. People would write in with all kinds of problems. Some of them sort of slightly racy, but not too much, because it was a family column. And somebody wrote into Dear Abby, and I'm going to read this. It's so good. Dear Abby, I received this beautiful tribute to our furry friends in our local Humane Society's newsletter. So, you know, the local Humane Society got it somehow and sent it out. And knowing that you are a sincere animal lover, I wanted to share it with you. If you print this, you had better warn your readers to get out their hankies before they read it. Sign me, an old softie in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Dear Abby says, I'm sure the readers will love it. And then she printed your piece, the Rainbow Bridge. And, you know, one number I saw was that 100 million people would have seen that when it came out.
Seems to have been quite popular.
Yeah. There might, you know,
it was the message. It was just the feeling. After it was all over, it calmed me a lot. And I think every time, I mean, I've lost dogs since then. I've had them, you know, the vet just had to put them to sleep and different things. And every time I just cry. It's like losing one of my babies.
Right. But you never went back and reread this piece after.
No. It really just lay dormantly and it was shifted around. You know, I always took that with me. It was sort of a comfort. We lived out in India, you know, with Jack.
So you and your husband, Jack.
Yes.
Right.
And Jack was retired, and he decided that he wanted to be an olive farmer. So that's what we did. We found...
Where were you in India?
We were 15 minutes from the Taj Mahal in Agra.
Oh, okay. Nice. And how long were you there for?
Oh, I can't remember. A few years.
And was the box, if you can't find it, it's in here with you in
No,
Agra?
the box was there at home with...
In Inverness.
Yeah,
Right. And so you were there for a few years in Agra. That must have been really something.
Oh, I loved it. And I spent my time actually rescuing children off the streets. You know, they were so horribly treated.
Right.
And a lot of them were killed. And even... It sounds too horrible, but men and things used to use these children, you know, for sex and things, and it was absolutely horrible. Their mothers couldn't afford to feed them or keep them. They were all beggars, and so they just abandoned them, and the poor little things were left there. So what we did was the big studio at the back. We made lots of little beds, and we saved them all. So we had a room for the boys and a room for the girls. And Jack was a retired doctor at that time. And he got, it's another part of the story, but he got very badly injured when he was cycling, and a lorry hooked him off the bike and was dragging him, and he was very badly injured. So that sort of meant that he couldn't travel. It couldn't sort of work normally anymore in India. Right. So he decided just to retire, and we actually married in the church that I used to go to as a child for Sunday school.
Oh, that's great.
And it was called the Barn. And this was an old barn that my father made into a church and a Sunday school. It was lovely.
Oh, nice.
It was really lovely.
So how did you and Jack decide to relocate after his retirement to
Well,
Agra?
before, even the first time I met him, I was working for the Highland News in Inverness, and I did features for them. So I was meeting this man in the Royal Hotel, and we were going to have lunch. So we sat there just chatting, and then the waitress came through, and she said, right, your table is ready for you. So we got up. I had a pile of papers and things because I was writing notes and, different stuff. And as we got up and walked, I suddenly fell over somebody's feet and I landed flat down on the floor on the carpet. And I just looked up and I saw him and I said, "For God's sake, you careless lump." And that was... And I was just so, and he was trying to help me, and I said, "You smoke." So that was exactly what happened. So, and I said, look, he wanted to help me up and pick up papers and things. The guy I was interviewing, you see, he'd gone off in front of us, so Jack was helping. I didn't know who he was. I quite frankly didn't care. I was just worried about not getting through to do this interview. And I said to him, "Well, go back to your cigarette smoking and I'll go and do what I have to do."
Were you against cigarette smoking at that point?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think I didn't. No, I had... Oh, wait a minute, I was 60. I had stopped smoking. She nagged me to stop smoking.
Good for you, Morag. That's what big sisters are for, right?
Yeah. She said to me at one point, "What are you doing that filthy habit for?" You don't remember? Anyway, that was what happened. And I did the feature with the guy, and that was on a Friday afternoon, and we were off for the weekend. And then on Monday morning, when I went to work, there was this massive bouquet of flowers on my desk. And on it said, what I called him earlier on.
How would it? I can't remember.
Well, that was when I was with the Highland News. And he said, oh, gosh, I can't remember. I did tell you. My memory's not so good nowadays.
You're 86 or something?
Oof, I'm only 83.
83.
I can't
remember. My
remember.
memory's not so good either.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember what he said. But what I had said to him, that's what I said, "You oaf." And so this great bouquet had a card on the bottom which said, "From the oaf." And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do about this? So anyway, he left a number or something for me to ring. And I didn't ring it. But then, I can't remember, it was an editor or something. I can't remember.
Because that's not something a woman would do, right?
No,
you wouldn't ring
don't.
up a man, even if he sent you all these flowers.
Yeah, and then he said, I thought, he will phone me, and he did. He got all my details from the Highland News, and then he contacted me. So that was how it happened. And then he said, "I'm coming in next weekend. Could we meet and talk and have a lunch?"
Coming into town?
Mm-hmm.
Town being Inverness?
Inverness,
and
yes.
Where was he coming in from?
Well, he'd been... At that time, he was one of the managers of Hunter's Woolen Mill, because he and his brother had a woolen mill out in India, and Jack was one of the ones that just trained people. So this man called Tom Simpson, who was now the manager of the Highland News, had been trained by Jack out in India.
Okay.
So that was why he'd come home, because Tom had said to him, would you like to do more of the business here?
Oh, nice. And is that then why, after he retired, you all chose to go to India?
Yes. He just suddenly said one day, "I would love to do olive farming." And I said, "Well, go ahead and do it," not even thinking about it. And then the next thing, what did he do? He'd been looking everywhere, and he said, "Let's go out to Spain and view this olive grove."
So this is from India. You went to Spain?
Yes, because I went back there with him.
Yeah, Jack was at the Hunter Mill. He was one of the supervisors at the Hunter Mill in Brora,
yes,
which made very wonderful tweeds.
Brora, yes, he did.
Yes, so you were living in Brora, and then you went to...
We got married in the old church that my father had decorated
Right.
and made. And we... what will I think? Yes, that's where we got married. But when I met him, the next time. I just loved him to bits as soon as I saw him. You know?
You what?
I loved him to bits.
Oh, that's so sweet. All right, so fast forward now. You're in Spain. You found a plot of ground that you liked.
Well,
I guess there was
it was in the mountains at Muro de Alcoy, it was called.
And there was an orchard there already?
Yes, and they were selling it. So, and it was in the mountains.
Uh-huh.
And a huge house. And I can't remember, 5 or 6 grows, but they were huge. And then, what else happened? Yeah, we bought it. That was it. Jack said he would. We saw all round it and went with an agent from Spain and went round the whole thing. And Jack said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think it's lovely. I'd quite like to stay here." So that's what we did.
Amazing. Then how long did you live in Spain?
5 or 6 years.
And this was your first time. I think Inverness is sort of around sea level, right? It's not.
Yes.
And Agra is not too high above sea level.
No, they were in Brora.
We were
in the
Brora,
north of Scotland.
in Spain.
Okay.
At that time.
And then they bought the house in Spain, and it did have vineyards and extra vineyards. When they bought it all terraced, it was wonderful on the edge of this natural protected forest.
Wonderful.
But the really interesting thing about Edna at that time was there were lots of feral cats came with the property, because I think probably because of the mountain up above. But she had a friend who was the local vet, and Edna gathered all the feral cats one at a time, had them brought down, got their shots, fixed up all their cuts and bruises, and I went out and visited, and she was sort of noted by the local community because of all this business of healing.
They thought I was a bit of a
She takes in the ferals, they used to say.
Sure.
It was really... There's such a marvelous story here, because all the things she did. When she was in Brora, she started a knitting business, and the Hunter is the main knitting mill. And so her husband in his office had all these. I visited because my mother was there with Edna, kept my mother too. And he had all these swatches, Hermes and Ralph Lauren, and they did all the tweeds for the main designers.
Oh, wow.
But then they decided to sell up the house in Brora, which was right on the sea, and the sea started encroaching. And they bought this olive farm in Spain.
Just amazing.
And that's when she started gathering the cats and having them healed and all this stuff. And there was a festival in the village while I was visiting, and we went down to see the festival, and they were taking a saint out of the church and carting it around. It was not a wasn't a tourist village. And we went down to see the parade, and they were all wearing national costume, and they had bouquets of flowers. Yeah. And everybody knew her. I was visiting, and they're coming out and kissing her on both cheeks. And then she was, introducing me, and I got kissed on both cheeks.
And where had you visited from? Were you living in New York City at the time?
I was living in New York City.
Right.
I was 40 years in loft. Right. Had a loft there working. But then I would go out because my mother had died by that time.
Yeah.
But then I went out to visit. But she's done such extraordinary things in her life.
Right. Now, it sounds like your father was in a design business, a clothing kind of business?
No clothing. No. He designed...
He designed houses.
Houses, okay. But buildings. You just said you'd go to his office and have all these fabric swatches and stuff.
No, that's her husband.
Oh,
my husband. Her husband
sorry.
in Brora. My father was long gone by that time.
Gotcha.
Well, he died. He was only 47.
Right.
When he died.
Oof. And she was 10
I was
or
about
something.
12, I think.
I was 19, and I was already in college in Edinburgh.
Yes. Okay.
But I was so angry at him for dying. How dare you leave me, And
Aw. I love that. That seems like a perfectly reasonable reaction.
Don't tell the rest of that story.
Is that what are you saying, Maureen?
What?
Are you asking your sister to
It's
tell?
a very sad story when my father died. He was away and he was brought back. And so we all have, I remember when Daddy died stories, because it was terrible, really.
How many other siblings are there?
Three brothers. So two of the brothers have died, and then my youngest brother is still, our youngest brother, Sandy, is still in Inverness, on Culloden, actually, staying there.
And how far away does he live from you?
Maybe about 7 miles. Yeah.
It's not bad. 7?
7 miles.
So do you see him often?
Well, sometimes. We're always so busy. Yes, we do see him, and he comes in and has a meal. You know, we have a meal together and remember old times and spend a lot of time laughing.
And do you remember the old times the same way, or do you frequently, does it, remembrances frequently dissolve into a little squabble about what actually happened?
No, I remember everything that was going on. We were in the school at Beloch to start with, and then we still stayed there. You know, till when? Well, I think it was 21 I got married, and then we left. But when my dad died, my mother had to take on a job because it was 5 children, and that was it. So anyway, she became the school cook, and the kids just loved her food. You know, it was absolutely wonderful. And she did that for a long time, and she sort of kept us all going. And you know, the life was always good.
It's nice. And so, what are your remembrances about Mom?
What do I remember about her?
Yeah, what was she like?
was
She had to be a little bit strict to keep 5 kids in line.
And you know, I loved her. I just adored her. She was very, very calm, and you know, she never shouted or anything. If there was something wrong, she would just talk to you about it. She never smacked us anything.
Right.
You know, I loved her.
And did all the siblings have more or less the same feeling about Mom?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. She was a very special mom.
God
Sort
bless
of
her
kept the whole ship afloat.
That's so lovely.
And that was good, so.
Now, I'm holding in my hand a pamphlet from Selkie, Borough, Scotland, and they're beautiful sweaters in here. Are these of your design, Edna?
Yes, entirely.
They're so gorgeous. And did you say that Morag is wearing one of them now?
Yeah. She had it there.
Yeah, this is one of Edna's.
Oh, that's a beautiful. That's
the really
gorgeous.
wonderful thing about that was she had her own. She designed her own tweed, and it was made at the Hunter Mill. So it's very high-end stuff she was doing. But also, it was a time when they were making employment for people in the Highlands, and so people were living way out on crofts, and the women were good knitters, and so all these people, knitters all over the Highlands, were knitting the pieces for Edna's, business.
And then they came.
Also, when I was there visiting, the Coast Guards were knitters. So the Coast Guards were women, and they would sit in there, watching the coast and knitting parts for Edna's woolens. And they'd bring them in, and we would talk at that time about what was happening, in the sea. And that was the beginning of the overfishing in Europe. And birds were washing up on the shore because they were starving, because they weren't getting enough fish. There was all sorts of stuff always going on around what she was doing, just really interesting
had a
stories.
wonderful life,
Oh, that's so nice to hear.
I'm very lucky to have done all I did.
And it sounds like you have 2 more. You lived in New York City. You were a designer?
Yes.
And what kinds of things were you designing? A creative family.
Yeah, I was working for a company. So I was working as a freelance designer, and I had studied with in Edinburgh ceramics and textiles.
And according to Edna, if I read her correctly, these 2 scarves that each of you is wearing.
Oh yes. That was afterwards in the I painted scarves and used those as a basis for developing lines of sheets, and also the designs on the silk were used for dinnerware. So they'd be photographed and digital images, and then they were made into decals to be put onto the dinnerware or, printed out for sheets and comforters and robes and stuff like that.
Yeah, these are beautiful.
These are gorgeous scarves.
Thank you. Yeah, they're painted. Yes, everything was painted silk.
Each one is individual.
Oh, wow. Amazing. There's a woman here who is painting scarves and using photographic processes to get her designs on the scarves as well, and they're so gorgeous. Right here in Rhinecliff, you should definitely meet.
Yes, meet.
So, a creative family. Were the brothers in any creative jobs as well?
Well, I had a twin brother, Jack, was my twin, and then we had my elder brother was Harry. Harry was my elder brother. And he was the boss of the kids.
And was as boss of the kids, was he sort of your mom's lieutenant?
Yes, I think he did. He looked after her. He looked after all of us, actually.
But did the brothers go into creative kinds of professions?
Jack eventually... Oh, he was in the RAF, wasn't he?
No, Harry was in the RAF, and then he moved up.
That's the Royal Air Force.
Scotland, and that was the beginning of salmon farming. And so he was doing engineering, so he invented or worked out all these methods of filtering the water and how to do salmon farming. So it was the very beginning of that whole thing. And what I loved about that was that he was very involved in the environment and protecting the loch, because this was a sea loch coming in Loch Island. And he would take his kids out with wetsuits, and they would swim with the seals. The seals would come in and swim with the children. And there were corals. This was the Gulf Stream was coming up the west coast of Scotland, and so it's very much warmer than you think it would be. There were palm trees, up there, and all these lochs with, sea urchins. And so Harry was really concerned about bringing in hundreds and hundreds of salmon and feeding them, and what that would do to the balance of the loch. So that was mainly what Harry was about, and he did that until he retired. And he loved model building, and he had a workshop, and he did all that stuff.
Right.
But her twin brother was the same thing with the animals, because he had a farm above Loch Ness, and was always, you know what he said? He would always say, I really like to bring the cruelty cases back, he said. And so the vet would always suggest these animals to him that he should take care of. And he did. And they were endless. He always was as a child like that. Lots of animals and birds. And then he was taking care of all these creatures. Yes. And it's an endless story. But that's a whole story in itself.
Jack was really, really keen on animals of all sorts. Anyway, he applied to go to the Falkland Islands, which is practically covered in sheep. So that he went out there for 5 years and lived his life on horseback and, treating these animals. And he loved animals. Lovely time it was for him.
Well, it's nice. Well, it sounds like you all grew up with enough animals.
Well, we had all grown up with loving nature.
Right.
And we loved all sorts of animals. I mean, if we even caught a stoat, we'd take it into the house. The stoats were the little killers, of the other animals.
Right, like a weasel or a ferret or a manker.
But whatever we had, I mean, we just loved animals. And used to teach people, don't smack your dog, there's no need,
Right.
Because there was an awful lot of cruelty before people realized that dogs were the humans' friends. And I've always loved my dogs.
Right.
Or our whole family dogs. So
now,
that was...
Now, you had, and there was Major, of course, but later on, I guess in Spain, you got a dog, Zanussi?
Zanussi, he was just a little puppy. The guy that lived next to our groves, Oh, he was so vicious to his animals. And he used to take the puppies. They were Andalusian Podencos, very tall, like great big greyhounds, but they were quite bigger. Anyway, he was terribly cruel to all these animals. He had all these dogs, and he used to breed them and then train them. At about 11 weeks, he would start training them. And within a week or 10 days, if they weren't doing what they were told, this is unbelievable, he used to beat them up, break a leg, and throw them out. Absolutely horrible.
Why would he break a leg?
He broke the legs so that nobody else could get them.
Egads.
And use them. He was horrible. But anyway, what happened was that my vet, my friend Almo, was our local vet, and her husband was the local judge. So we had this guy arrested and all his dogs taken from him, and he was put to prison for 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you met Zanussi, did he have a broken leg?
Yes. He was in a terrible state. I have a picture of him.
Oh, that's okay. But why is he named Zanussi?
Well, he was named Zanussi because I found him in my washing machine.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea he was there. He'd obviously managed to come up because we had a storm and one of the fences went down. So my other dog, Megan, she was a Springer Spaniel, and she was dragging me along the front porch, I can't remember, big long veranda. And when we got to the end of it, round the back was my washing area, where my washing machine and things. So anyway, Megan was pulling at me, and I thought she definitely wants me to do something to come and see. And when I got there, the door to the washing machine was open, and she poked her head right in. Her tail was wagging, and I thought, what is in there?
And what kind of dog was Megan?
Megan was a Springer Spaniel.
Okay.
Oh, so gentle.
So she's dragging you to the
She
clothes
dragged me
washing
to
machine.
see what was in there.
Yeah.
And this was this little dog. Oh, absolutely battered to bits. His ribs were broken. His leg was broken. It was just agony. But he was terrified, absolutely terrified. Anyway, I went inside and I got my camera and I photographed him.
I think I saw that picture online.
Yes, it's on the front of my book, actually.
And his name's Zanussi, and the brand of washing
machine. Well, the
machine.
brand of the washing machine was Zanussi.
Okay.
So that's what he was.
That's where the name came from.
Yeah.
Because it was just a few inches away from him.
Yeah. So I called Almo when I got him, and she said, I'll be right up. And she came up straight away, and she said, oh, he's in a terrible mess. I'll take him, and I'll open it. I said, no, I will take him to you, and I'm going to stay with him. I don't want him, to have any more fear.
Right.
So that's what happened. And he had his leg in plaster, and stitches were done, and she bound up his ribs and things.
His leg in a cast. That's really something else.
He was absolutely terrified. And of men, he just went into a little heap. He was so frightened, you know.
And when in all this did you decide to write the book, Zanussi and Jack? Jack's your husband, right?
Yes. Jack got Alzheimer's when he was out there.
In Spain?
Yes. He adored Zanussi, and the two of them were so close. And Jack was the only man that he loved.
Oh.
Any other men, he was just terrified of them. And we always thought, yes, he's terrified because of the beatings he had from this man and how he treated him.
Yeah.
But he had managed to get up. When we had this storm, part of our land fell down into the next lot. And he had obviously managed to get, how he did it, I don't know. But he'd managed to get himself up there. And I ended up in my washing machine.
I love that.
So,
and so your book, Jack and Zanussi, or Zanussi and Jack, is about dealing with a spouse who's dealing with Alzheimer's.
It was very, very different. He was such a clever man, and he was so kind. It was absolutely lovely. And then these things started happening where he picked up a hammer one day and was battering the table with it. And I said, what are you doing? And, he was in such a state, he hadn't realized he'd done it. And there were just tears, and I just hugged him. And then it gradually got worse. he had spells when he didn't recognize who I was, and it always ended in tears. He was so shocked. It seemed to be just a fit that happened each time. And then the last one was just so horrific that I thought, this can't go on. We've got to get back home. So he came along the terrace towards me, and he had this knife in his hand. And I said, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to get you. And I had a brush just beside me, and I picked it up, and I managed to hit his hand, and the knife came out of it. And of course, then he realized what he'd done, and again it was tears. But I said, Jack, this is not going to happen again. Definitely not. So that's what happened. We moved back home, and he had all the medical treatment, you know, that he needed.
Back home to Inverness.
Yes.
Right. Was he diagnosed early enough for him to understand that he had a degenerative neurological disease, and that's how it was going to go bad?
And at times he would deal with it, but then it became that he didn't really know what he was doing half of the time, and I had to have him in care.
Right.
He had to go in care, and that was how he was so angry at me for, you know, putting him in care.
So you wrote this book, and profits from the sale of the book were going to go to Alzheimer's Scotland.
Yes.
But the book's been pirated? Is that what you were telling me?
It was pirated, and we've got 4 names that we know of, and they're going to be tracked down and prosecuted, really, and they have to pay back as much of that money, you know, that comes, because all the profits from that were going to go to the Arthritis Society.
Right.
The Alzheimer's Society.
Right.
Yes. So we're working on that just now. And in fact, Paul Coronavirus is helping me with that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Now, I would love to, if I wanted to get a certified version of the book and not a pirated version, how could I do that?
It's difficult, I think, you know, but I think the best way is if you get it off the internet and get them to send you a copy of the book. And did I show you the one I had?
I'm not sure. Oh, nice. Oh, that's so sweet. And there's Zanussi in the washing machine.
So there's all pictures in it, you see. There's lots of pictures of when we were in Spain and...
Well, I would love to track this down and get a copy. Yeah. Listen, we only have a minute left.
Oh, right.
I wanted to ask in that minute, what did you think when this Paul Coronavirus guy came up and told you that this thing that you had written had become really famous all over the world, translated into Russian and I'm sure French and Spanish and everything?
I think I gave a loud gasp and said, "Oh my God!"
Did you believe him? Did you think he was pulling your leg?
Well, I thought he was sort of coming something. You know, I wasn't very happy. But then he sent me a book that he'd written, and it had his signature and his name on it and everything. So it was lovely.
So
he's very. Look him up.
I will. I'll look him up.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That's the end of our hour. I can't even believe it's over. My guests have been Morag Benepi and Edna Clyne Rekhy,
yes,
who wrote the poem or the piece called Rainbow Bridge,
yes.
As well as this book, Zanussi and Jack. And thank you both so much for being here. And I hope I'll see you around, Morag. I hope I see you again someday, Edna.
Well, whoever knows, yes. But thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Take care.
You.
Thank you.